There comes a point in every man's life when the applause fades, when chasing women feels empty, when even success loses its flavor. In that quiet, something ancient stirs beneath all his achievements, a sadness without a name, a longing that logic can't touch. And in that moment, he encounters the ghost of his first love, not a woman out in the world, but the mother within his unconscious. Carl Jung warned us about this. He called it the mother complex, an invisible inheritance, a deep psychological structure that silently shapes a man's whole life, turning it into a reaction to a wound he doesn't even realize he carries. This isn't about blaming your mother. It's about realizing that the most confining prisons aren't built from steel, but from expectations, old archetypes, and the belief that love must be earned by becoming something you think she wanted, even if she never asked. From your first breath, she was your world. Her smile was your approval. Her silence felt like punishment. She was the first mirror you ever looked into, and what you saw in her eyes became your truth about your own worth. But here's what Jung teaches. The archetype of the mother isn't your actual mother. It's a symbol rooted deep in our collective unconscious, a blueprint of origin, nourishment, protection, but also engulfment, regression, and dependence if it's not integrated. And that's where the fracture happens, when your real mother can't live up to the impossible standards of the archetype. The child doesn't grieve, he adapts. He molds himself to win her gaze, earn her love, survive. That version becomes the mask, and over time, the mask becomes the man. But inside, there's still a boy, aching, performing, compensating, chasing women not for true connection, but to fix something, to resurrect the mother who lives inside the wound. Jung said, "What is not made conscious will be lived as fate." So you repeat the pattern, you fall for women who echo her distance, her coldness, her silence. You self-sabotage right before you succeed. You shrink in the face of feminine disapproval, not because you're weak, but because deep down, part of you still believes her gaze decides whether you deserve to exist. Here's the part most men never face. You can't become whole until you shatter the illusion. You can't truly become your own man until you step out of your mother's psychic orbit. Jung didn't mean this literally. He meant you need to differentiate, to see her not as a goddess or a villain, but as a real, flawed human being, shaped by her own shadows. Until you do that, you're not loving her. You're worshipping an idea or fighting a myth. Both will keep you broken. Ask yourself, are you really living your own life, or are you still trying to prove your worth to a mother who isn't even watching anymore? This isn't self-help. This is soul surgery. Because every time you react with guilt, freeze at rejection, or over-function in relationships, you're not acting as a man. You're echoing the child who still hopes that if he's just good enough, he'll finally be chosen. But healing doesn't come from being chosen. It comes from choosing yourself, from releasing the sacred expectation that the mother who gave you life can also give you your identity. She can't. That's your job now. A man who hasn't made peace with his inner mother doesn't date. He reenacts. He doesn't lead. He compensates. He doesn't love. He pleads for redemption in disguise. Because what haunts him isn't a person, it's a projection. Jung taught that the unconscious projects its contents onto the world if they're not integrated within. And nothing is more powerful to an unexamined man than the image of the feminine. So he doesn't look for a partner. He looks for a mirror, a surrogate mother, to finally finish the old story. He calls it chemistry, but it's just repetition. He says, she completes me, but it's regression. The boy reaching for emotional security he never got. Jung called this projection. When a man's inner feminine, shaped by the first woman in his life, is cast onto the women he meets, he doesn't see them. He sees her, the mother, the hope, the hunger, and it breaks him. Because no woman can carry the weight of an unconscious child. She becomes overwhelmed by the unspoken expectation that she'll save him, soothe him, forgive him, complete him, without him ever asking, because the boy doesn't ask, he just waits. When she can't give what even his own mother couldn't, he feels abandoned again, not by her, but by the wound she opened. That's the cycle Jung warned us about, the fate of a man who hasn't withdrawn his projections. He turns every relationship into a ritual sacrifice, bleeding out his soul to recover something that never existed, the perfect mother. So, the real question is, how long will you let the past control your gaze? Jung, how long will you confuse love with salvation? Because as long as the mother archetype inside you is either idealized or demonized, you're not seeing clearly. Not her, not yourself. And until that changes, you'll confuse intimacy with need, sex with healing, silence with rejection, and abandonment with destiny. Here's the truth Jung offered, wrapped in fire. The feminine must be reclaimed, not repeated. To do that, the man has to descend into his unconscious, confront the pain he buried, not to blame his mother, but to reclaim his soul. This process is what Jung called individuation, not the pursuit of perfection, not the pursuit of perfection. The transformation of unconscious patterns into conscious choice. Jung, so what does that mean for you? It means that until you face the wound, you'll keep asking the world to mother you. And the world won't. The world will break you until you become your own protector, until you father yourself, until you withdraw your ancient loyalty to a pain that never served you. And that process is anything but poetic. It's disorienting. Because when you stop looking for your mother in women, you're going to feel alone. Not because you are, but because for the first time, you're standing in the silence she used to fill. And it's in that silence that the real man begins to form. You think you're stuck because you're lazy. You think you haven't succeeded because you lack discipline. But what if the truth is darker? What if you're not failing, you're being loyal? Jung noticed that the unconscious isn't ruled by logic, but by myth. And one of the oldest myths is this: if I grow beyond the suffering of those who raised me, I betray them. This is the unspoken pact. The boy doesn't write it, but he lives by it. It sounds like, if my mother suffered, who am I to thrive? If she was unloved, how dare I feel chosen? If she carried pain, what right do I have to feel free? This isn't reason, it's emotional gravity, pulling you back to the psychic atmosphere of your childhood, to the room you left physically, but never outgrew inside. So what happens? You dim your light before success. You ruin good relationships before they become safe. You seek rejection just to feel familiar, not because you want to, but because a part of you whispers, if I heal, I leave her behind. Jung called this binding archetypal possession, when the archetype doesn't just influence you, but inhabits you. When your mother's pain becomes your identity. When you carry her sadness like a relic, afraid to let it go because then, who are you without it? You become her echo, her shadow, her second chance, not on purpose, Jung, but out of faithfulness, as a son trying to fix what was never his to fix. And here's the paradox. You can't honor your mother by suffering with her. You can only honor her by growing beyond her. This isn't betrayal, it's liberation. The purpose of a son is not to stay in orbit around the mother's grief, but to step out of it, to carry forward what was unlived, to become the branch that breaks the cycle without cutting off the roots. That's maturity, the birth of the adult self, not as a reaction to pain, but as a conscious act of separation. So if you find yourself sabotaging your own success, choosing smallness, shrinking around joy or power, ask yourself the question most men avoid: who am I betraying by being happy? And when the answer comes, and it will, you'll know exactly where your wound still lives. But here's your truth, and you need to burn it into your soul. Her pain is not your destiny. She gave you life, yes. But what you do with that life, that's your gift back to her. You are not here to repeat her story. You're here to finish it, not by carrying her suffering, but by transcending it, so that one day, when you look in the mirror, you don't see her sadness. You see your own sovereignty. There's a kind of loneliness nobody talks about, the loneliness inside a man who has abandoned himself. He wakes up, performs, smiles on cue. But if you look beneath the surface, you'll find a child in the corner of his psyche, unseen, unheard, still waiting for a warmth that never came. Jung said what remains unconscious doesn't vanish. It lives on as fate. And the greatest fate of the unhealed man is this: he becomes the very presence he always needed, but never received, not toward others, but toward himself. He tells himself to toughen up when he needs compassion. He pushes through exhaustion when he needs rest. He mocks his own pain. Jung laughs off his sadness, punishes himself for emotions he'd comfort in anyone else. He becomes his own strict parent, his own absent nurturer, his own silent judge. This is the final frontier of the mother complex. Emotional self-abandonment. It's not just about what she did. It's about how you now treat yourself in the same language. How her disapproval still echoes in your mind, but now in your own voice. Jung called this the inner mother, an archetype that, when wounded, sits on the throne of your psyche and runs your worth, your choices, your relationships, even your sense of safety. So what do most men do? They run, they perform, they distract themselves with work, with women, with noise. But wherever they go, the same question follows: why do I feel empty, even when I do everything right? The answer is because you left yourself trying to win a love that was never yours to earn. You stopped checking in with yourself. You abandoned your joy, your softness, your intuition, because the model of love you inherited taught you your needs were too much, your sadness was inconvenient, your vulnerability was weakness. But here's what Jung would tell you, and it's the truth men need to hear, even if it shakes them. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, not who you were told to be, not who you had to become to feel safe, but who you were before the adaptation. And to get back to that man, you don't need more strength, you need compassion. Not pity, not indulgence, something braver, the willingness to sit with your pain, without trying to fix it, justify it, or silence it. That is self-fathering, that is repair, that is the act of becoming the internal guide you never had. And it's not an easy path, it's brutal. Because when you stop abandoning yourself, you have to face the grief you've been running from your whole life. But in that grief is your redemption. Because the moment you say to yourself, I see you, I'm not leaving you again, something shifts. You're no longer the echo of your childhood. You're no longer begging love to find you. You're no longer chasing the approval of a ghost. You are finally coming home, not to her, but to you. You've spent your life trying not to become your father, but without noticing, you became a prisoner to your mother, not by choice, but by inheritance. The real tragedy isn't that she failed you, but that you kept her voice alive inside your mind long after she left the room. Jung understood something most modern men miss. The point of growth isn't rebellion, it's loving separation. It's stepping out of old patterns with compassion for yourself and for her. If you found value in this, share, subscribe, and if you want to support the channel, there's a link in the description.